It was the middle of the night when flickering lights and loud clattering sounds jolted me awake from a wonderful dream. Through bleary eyes, I saw my parents looking down at me, absolutely frantic. Before I could even ask what was wrong, my mom told me I had to leave England immediately because our family had received a death threat. I jumped out of bed, my voice shaking as I asked what happened. My dad didn't answer, but urgently told me to pack because we were running out of time. I panicked, asking where I was supposed to go and what would happen to them. Dad explained I was going to the United States, and for my safety, I had to use the fake name Chloe Stewart. He strictly warned me to pretend I had no connection to our family. My mom whimpered, asking Dad to ensure I had a comfortable place, then promised they would bring me back as soon as this mess was sorted out. Seeing them so terrified, I forced myself to stay calm, told them I would be fine, and rushed to catch my flight. Oh, by the way, I should probably introduce myself to you before I continue. My real name is Elise Stone. Back home in England, my family is quite well known because my dad owns one of the biggest real estate firms in the country. I used to think of myself as pretty fearless, but this whole situation left me feeling incredibly anxious and unsettled. By the next afternoon, I found myself standing in front of a massive brick building at Phillips Academy, clutching my suitcase. I looked up at the window of my new room, let out a heavy sigh, and prayed that I would be safe there for the time being. That evening, I dragged my suitcase into the room, exhausted. My mind kept drifting back to my parents' warning. I just couldn't understand who would want to harm us. My dad owned one of the largest real estate firms in the United Kingdom, but he was a fair man with no enemy. I let out a heavy sigh, thinking about how insane this was, and walked to the balcony for some fresh air. My heart stopped when I saw a white shadow dangling outside. On it, a cloth read "Get Out" in bloody red text. Suddenly, a strong gust of wind blew into my face, forcing me to step back. I tripped over something hard and went crashing to the floor. I looked down and gasped. It was a human skull. Right then, a creepy sound like something from a horror movie echoed through the room. My head was spinning, but I quickly spotted a small speaker hiding under the desk. Realizing it was a prank, I smiled. These cheap tricks couldn't scare Elise the fearless. I scrambled up to smash the device, but a boy suddenly jumped in from the balcony and blocked my way. He sharply told me to stop and demanded to know who I was. Startled, I snapped back, asking who he was and reminding him that this was my bedroom. He casually picked up the speaker, told me this room wasn't for just anyone, and suspiciously asked who my parents were. I froze and stammered, unable to reveal my real identity. Luckily, a knock at the door saved me from his questioning gaze. I opened it to find Rita, a girl sent by the school to help me settle in. She went on and on about the regulations, but I couldn't focus. My mind was entirely on the boy. When she finished and asked if I had any questions, I pointed to the balcony and mentioned that the security seemed questionable, asking if there were any safety measures. I glanced over and noticed the boy had vanished. Rita explained that this was the only room with a balcony, warning me to be careful because it could get quite eerie at times. She then handed me my schedule and welcomed me to the school. Closing the door, her words lingered in my mind. The whole situation was definitely weird. Staring at the empty balcony, I couldn't help but wonder if that boy was deliberately trying to scare people out of this room. The next morning, the crisp, dewy air smelled like fresh-cut grass as I made my way down to the sports field. According to the schedule Rita had given me, my very first football practice was set for today. So I had confidently dressed in my usual British football kit, a lightweight jersey, shorts, and knee-high socks. But as I stepped onto the bright green grass and looked around, my jaw dropped. Everyone else on the field was dressed incredibly funny, looking like giant, bulky robots with massive plastic shoulder pads and heavy helmets. I stood there frozen as the entire team turned to stare at me like I was a literal alien that had just landed on Earth. Within seconds, they all started laughing their butts off. One student walked up to me, pointed directly at my lightweight shirt, and explained that over here in America, they called my sport soccer, whereas their game with all the heavy armor was called football. Then they smirked and asked if I had ever even played it before. My face instantly flushed hot with deep embarrassment, and I mentally smacked my forehead. Oh yeah, I had completely forgotten that I was in the United States now, and Americans have totally different names for loads of everyday stuff. It was so mortifying. Sensing my discomfort, another student told me not to sweat it, laughing softly and adding that my mistake was actually kind of cute. Then they casually asked for my full name, mentioning that they might know my family if they were prominent. I forced a polite smile and told them I was Chloe Stewards from England. The moment the words left my mouth, everyone just shrugged cluelessly, clearly having never heard the name before. I let out a quiet sigh of relief, feeling a sudden wave of comfort wash over me. For the first time in my life, I was just a complete nobody to everyone around me, and that was exactly what I needed to stay safe. Despite my desire to just blend in, Rita absolutely refused to let me look ordinary. Right after class, she insisted that my comfortable clothes were far too sloppy for a typical Phillips student, and dragged me straight to the nearby mall. The store smelled intensely of expensive perfumes and new fabric. I really liked Rita, but as she excitedly pulled shirts off the racks while chatting with some other girl, I couldn't help but feel she was a bit too enthusiastic, if not a little overwhelmed. As I was browsing a rack of jackets, a middle-aged woman suddenly approached me with a look of pure shock on her face. She called me by my real name, Elise Stone, loudly asking what I was doing here and if my family had moved to America. My heart plummeted into my stomach. It was the absolute worst timing to bump into a family friend. I frantically winked and shook my head, silently begging her to stop talking, while glancing around to see if anyone had noticed. But luck wasn't on my side. I turned around to find Rita standing right behind me, her eyes sparkling with intense curiosity. Rita practically bounced on her toes, eagerly repeating my real name aloud. I let out a heavy sigh, realizing it was completely impossible to escape her endless questioning. I dragged her to a quieter corner, confessed the whole truth about the death threat, and begged her to keep it a secret. She just winked at me, reassuring me not to worry because she wouldn't tell a single soul, proudly declaring that she had my back as my undercover friend. Suddenly, a loud commotion broke out, and a crowd of shoppers began flocking toward the main entrance. 3 handsome boys walked in, looking like they owned the place. Rita gripped my arm, pointing at them with a dreamy look, and told me they were the school's golden boy, the absolute top players of the varsity football team named Jaden, Aaron, and Jeffrey. I stared at them and rolled my eyes, wondering if I had somehow trapped myself inside a teenage drama series. But then my eyes locked onto the middle boy and I froze. It was the exact same guy who had broken onto my balcony the night before. On the way back to my room that evening, I couldn't stop wondering what a popular school celebrity like him was doing lurking outside my window. But the moment I unlocked and opened my door, all those thoughts vanished as I found myself standing in what looked like a literal haunted house. The entire room was cast under an eerie, dim green light. Toy spiders were hanging from the wall, and fake spiderwebs were draped over every single piece of furniture. In the middle of it all, a human skeleton was sitting upright on my neatly made bed. I took a deep breath, recognizing the faint smell of plastic. I slowly approached the bed and realized this was just the medical skeleton model from our biology class earlier that day. I picked up the heavy plastic bones to carry them to the corner, but I got tangled up in a bunch of sticky toy spiders, which made me scowl in frustration. Suddenly, a bright streak of light cut through the darkness from the balcony. Jaden was standing out there, pointing a flashlight directly up at his own face to look menacing. Oh right, I had forgotten to lock the balcony door that morning. Frustrated, I marched out onto the balcony to confront this annoying intruder who had sneaked in yet again. Jaden looked genuinely surprised to see me unfazed, a playful smile spreading across his face as he called me soccer girl, and admitted he was impressed by my lack of fear. I snapped at him, demanding to know why he was trying so hard to scare me out of my own room, and what he actually wanted from me. He leaned against the railing, explaining that he lived right next door and this balcony had always been his favorite spot to relax. But since I moved in, he had lost his private space to chill. I stared at him, completely dumbfounded. That was his entire grand motive? Since I was only staying here temporarily and didn't care about having a balcony, I figured keeping the peace was my best option to avoid unnecessary trouble. I told him that if he wanted the outdoor space that badly, he could have it, but under the strict condition that he never set foot inside my actual bedroom without my permission again. Jaden looked incredibly pleased, agreeing instantly, but jokingly added that since the balcony was his territory now, I wasn't allowed to wander out into his space either. I laughed and agreed to the term. We actually linked our pinky fingers right there in the cool night air, officially making my balcony door the border between our two worlds. The next day, the hallway smelled of fresh wax as I struggled to carry the biology skeleton back to the equipment room. Suddenly, Grace and her boyfriend, Aaron, came sprinting through the crowd. Before I could move, someone slammed into me, sending the box flying. The plastic skeleton launched into the air and landed right on Aaron, tangling in his jacket. Aaron aggressively pushed it off and shouted at me to watch where I was going with my stupid thing. Irritated, I shot back that he was the one running like a maniac, and slowing down wouldn't be a bad idea. His face turned red as he stepped closer, threateningly asking if I was talking back to him. Thankfully, Rita appeared and told everyone to chill out. Grace immediately shoved Rita aside, causing her to lose her balance, but Jeffrey caught her just in time. Jeffrey sternly asked Grace and Aaron why they were picking on the new girl. Grace just crossed her arms and snapped that I had better apologize to her boyfriend. Jeffrey told her to drop it, then turned his full attention to me. He gently placed his hands on my shoulders, looking into my eyes, and told me he knew moving to a new country could be tough, so I should let him know if I ever needed needed anything. I felt totally flustered by his overly friendly touch, but before I could reply, Rita grabbed my wrist and dragged me down another hall. Rita looked visibly bothered and asked how I knew Jeffrey. I told her I didn't know him at all and had literally just met him. She immediately blushed and whispered that Jeffrey was actually her secret boyfriend. But they hadn't gone public yet. Oh, that explained her reaction. I quickly reassured her that I wasn't interested in him in the slightest. Rita then mentioned that Jeffrey was the school's head boy, which explained why he knew everything about everyone, including a newcomer like me. But I figured as long as I used the name Chloe Stewards, it wouldn't matter. Unfortunately, Grace wouldn't stop playing dirty tricks on me. At lunch, she walked past my table and deliberately spilled a red drink all over my tray, giving a fake gasp and saying she was such a clumsy klutz sometimes. Later, as I walked down the hall, I noticed students giggling at me. I was completely confused until Rita rushed over and ripped a piece of paper off my back that read, "I'm a big fat loser." I groaned in frustration at her childish behavior. Her games escalated that afternoon on the central staircase when she suddenly threw a plastic snake at my feet. The fright caught me off guard. I gasped and tripped backward, starting to fall down the stairs. Just as I braced for impact, a strong hand caught my arm and pulled me safely against a firm chest. It was Jaden. Grace and her friends were laughing hysterically at the top of the stairs. But Jaden didn't find it funny. He announced loudly to the entire staircase that everyone needed to listen up because I was officially his girl. He glared at Grace, warning her that if anything happened to me again, it would be on her. The entire hallway went dead silent as everyone stared at me in shock, whispering and wondering since when I was his girlfriend. That evening, I sat inside my room watching Jaden chill out on the balcony. I couldn't wrap my head around his public stunt, so I walked over and asked him why he had said those things. Jaden flashed a small smile and told me to think of it as a thank you gift for letting him have the balcony, adding that the space meant a whole lot to him right now. I nodded, accepting his answer, but I couldn't help but wonder what was so important to him out there. I hesitated, wanting to ask for details, but decided to give up on the thought. We had a strict deal, and it was best for me to just mind my own business. The next morning, the outdoor study space smelled of fresh dew, but I couldn't even enjoy it. Who would have thought Jaden's fake announcement would bring me so much trouble? As I sat reading, Jeffrey noticed me and dragged a grumpy Aaron over to my table. Suddenly, I was the center of attention, surrounded by these popular golden boys around the clock. Jeffrey flashed me a warm smile, making me feel so uncomfortable that I awkwardly scooted over. I was just about to stand up and excuse myself when the surrounding girls went absolutely primal. Jaden was walking toward us. He marched up and casually tossed a plastic lunchbox onto my book, grumbling that someone with a goldfish brain like me would obviously forget to eat. I stared at the box, completely annoyed. Nobody had asked him to bring me food, and looking around at the piercing, jealous glares from the girls, I groaned internally. Great, now they had another reason to hate my gut. From that day on, all the golden boys started acting incredibly strange, and so did Grace. One afternoon, as I was walking past a school bush, the cleaning lady was watering the plant. Grace suddenly darted out, grabbing my arm and dragging me away from the spray to keep me from getting wet, while Aaron hovered nearby to check if I was okay. This former mean girl was suddenly watching over me like a hawk. To make things worse, Jeffrey kept trying to get uncomfortably close to me. When I reached for a book on a high library shelf, he suddenly appeared and grabbed it for me. I glanced over and saw Rita watching us from a desk, looking completely heartbroken. It put me in such an awkward dilemma, because the last thing I wanted was for my friend to get the wrong idea. Jaden was the strangest of all, refusing to quit acting like my personal bodyguard. I was finally having some fun at the crowded school festival, when he suddenly materialized out of nowhere, grabbed my wrist, and dragged me out of the crowd. Once we reached a quiet spot under the midnight sky, I snapped. Flipped with frustration, I told him this was getting to be way too much. Insisting that I wasn't scared of Grace's childish pranks and could take care of myself, Jaden let out a heavy sigh and explained that this wasn't about Grace at all. He confessed that he had noticed someone suspicious watching me from a distance and even following me around campus a couple of times, adding that it wasn't safe for me to be in large crowds anymore. I froze on the spot, a cold chill running down my spine. Was I actually being stalked this whole time? Was it the same person who had sent the death threat to my family back in England? Did they somehow find out I was hiding here? I looked up at Jaden, realizing with a wave of gratitude that who knows what could have happened to me if he hadn't been watching out for me all this time. That night, as if to confirm my worst fears, my dad called. His voice was trembling with anxiety as he told me they had received yet another threat. And this time, the person had pinpointed my exact location at the academy. As I hung up, shaking with pure terror in the middle of my dark room, a loud, heavy bang suddenly rattled my front door. Freaked out, I completely forgot about our strict deal. I sprinted straight out onto the balcony, threw myself over the divider and jumped right onto Jaden, clinging to him for dear life. Jaden gasped in shock, catching me by the waist and asking if I was okay and what was going on. Stuttering with fear, I pointed frantically back toward my room and whispered that someone was loudly knocking on my door. Jaden peered over the railing toward my dark bedroom, then gently patted my shoulder. He smiled softly, telling me there was absolutely no one there, and teasingly asked if I was really that big of a scaredy cat. Suddenly realizing that I was practically wrapped around him, I quickly jumped off, my face burning red. Oh gosh, it was so incredibly embarrassing. But as I sneaked a glance at him, I noticed his cheeks looked a little flushed too. To break the awkward silence, I looked around the balcony and was surprised to see a bunch of strange electronic gear, wires, and glass jars scattered everywhere. I asked him what all this stuff was, jokingly questioning if he was trying to build illegal bomb. Jaden gave a coy smile and explained that it wasn't a weapon at all. It was actually a machine designed to attract fireflies. Speaking softly, he confessed that fireflies had always deeply fascinated him, which was why he needed my balcony for his science project. He pointed down toward the dark flower garden below, calling it their playground. He then leaned over and flipped a few switches on his machine. Within seconds, a massive glowing swarm of fireflies rose from the garden, lighting up the entire dark balcony in a pulsing golden glow. It created a breathtaking, fairy tale-like scenery right before my eyes. The grand secret behind why he wanted my balcony had finally come to light, literally. Suddenly, Jaden reached out and grabbed my shoulders, his gaze completely fierce and determined. He told me that although he didn't know what dangerous secret I was hiding, I needed to stop being afraid because he promised he would find out exactly who was behind these threats. His pure determination touched my heart so deeply. Still, as I lay in bed later, I couldn't stop worrying about those mysterious knocks on the door. Who could it possibly be? From that night on, I stuck by Jaden's side constantly. We became like SpongeBob and Patrick, completely inseparable everywhere we went on campus, ignoring all the dead, jealous stares I kept getting from the other girls. Walking beside him every day, I finally understood why everyone was going so crazy over him. He might seem a little kooky and eccentric with his gadgets at first, but underneath it all, he was actually so incredibly caring, protective, and unique. Before the term ended, the school organized a camping trip. I made sure to keep Jaden, Aaron, and Jeffrey in sight for my own safety. The hike was brutal, and as the trail grew steeper, most students dropped out. But Jaden kept moving forward without a hint of exhaustion. I tried my best to keep up, but when I paused to catch my breath and looked up, he was gone. Panicked, I scanned the mountains as the cold wind whipped around. I felt a heavy stare on my back, but when I spun around, no one was there. Just as I started to run and call out for Jaden, a strong hand grabbed me from behind. It was Jeffrey, and without a word, he dragged me away. I was terrified, demanding to know what he was doing and where he was taking me. Jeffrey snapped that he had been waiting for this moment, saying I should ask why fate had dropped me right into the hands of my enemy. I gasped, asking if he was the one behind the death threat. He angrily admitted his parents were, but now he was in it too. He blamed my dad's real estate project for taking away his family's mining land and driving them to bankruptcy, adding that the scandal had even reached Rita's dad, who was now forcing them to break up. I snatched my hand away, arguing that this was our parents' business and I had nothing to do with it. But he grabbed me again, saying they would finally act if their precious daughter was in danger. Right then, Jaden appeared and forcefully broke Jeffrey's grip. He apologized for leaving me alone, explaining he had needed to bait the culprit. Jeffrey screamed at him to stay out of it, but Jaden stood in front of me, telling Jeffrey to calm down and not throw away everything he had achieved as head boy just because of his parents' mistake. Jeffrey froze and collapsed to his knee. Jaden knelt down to comfort him, promising to ask his own dad to help their business since their families had always been close. Seeing Jeffrey break down, I actually felt bad for him. What he did was awful, but his parents should have never put him in this unfair position. That evening at the mountain campsite, Jeffrey looked deep in thought before dragging Rita out for a private talk, leaving everyone confused. Grace and Aaron winked at each other and also left, leaving Jaden and me alone. I took a deep breath of fresh air when suddenly a beautiful swarm of fireflies filled the sky, followed by Jaden holding his sound wave machine. He looked at me and said he knew it was my choice, but if I were willing to stay here instead of going back to England, he promised to take care of me. Looking at him beaming against the gorgeous skyline, my heart beat a little faster. He was so sweet and caring, and I wondered if he finally had real feelings for me. Right then, Rita and Jeffrey returned. Jeffrey apologized for scaring me, and Rita said sorry for failing to keep my identity a secret. I just smiled, telling them that what was done, and we should just enjoy the beautiful sight. The next day, we returned to the school hall, but instead of a regular notice, my homeroom teacher and classmates had organized a surprise farewell party because the principal told them I was going back to England. Everyone wished me luck on my journey, But looking around, I felt a sting of disappointment because Jaden hadn't even bothered to say goodbye. Suddenly, all the lights went out, the candles flickered, and Jaden appeared while everyone else seemed to vanish into the dark. He softly told me that he respected my decision to leave, but he wanted me to know that he really liked me and would be thinking about me no matter where I went. I smiled and interrupted, telling him that I was actually staying and had already informed my dad. Before I could even finish my sentence, he pulled me into a tight hug, whispering that Elise Stone was all he wanted to hear. Suddenly, the lights flared back on and everyone popped out from nowhere, cheering loudly at our surprised, blushing faces.